Hi guitarlings, I'm Gray at Hub Guitar, here today with another lesson on Lament by Pat Coldrick. So if you've heard this tune, it's just one of the most beautiful modern guitar tunes that I've heard in a long time. And I first heard it, there's a great young guitar player named Olivia Chang who did a version of this, which just really I thought was amazing. And so that's what led me to reach out to the composer and ask for permission to bring this lesson to you. So starting off, thank you, Pat Coldrick, so much for letting us use your beautiful tune to create this lesson. And of course, without you, this couldn't happen. Before we start, this tune is in drop D, so you're going to need to take your 6th string and drop it down a whole step. It should match your 4th string and get you a nice D chord. So we're starting at a pickup with our index finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And we're going to reach our pinky finger up to the 5th fret. We're going to let those two ring together before we move to the first measure. Now I've got my middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. And I play that open 4th string. Now the next note really should just, hit you like a punch in the stomach. It is a super sad note and you really want to give it the treatment it deserves. I mean, you want to look like you just heard the worst news in your life. Ready? Like it should hurt, and we should see that in your face. If it's in your face, it's in your playing, okay? So that 3rd fret note that's coming from the minor key very unexpectedly, and we're going to use our index finger on that. I like to give it a little bit of a delay, and I like to soften it up a little bit. We don't want to play that really loud. We want to kind of smooth out that really tense moment. And I also feel that it's kind of rubato here, so it's not like you should be playing with a metric do, dee, da, do, da, da, dee, dee, da, da, It's more feeling than that. It's a sad tune. Okay, so at the end of the first measure, we're going to put our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, play that, and then index finger goes to the 2nd fret, and then pulls right off, before going back for the following measure. Now, in the following measure, we're actually not going back to a single fretted note. We're going into a bar. So we want to do this. That's really important because we're going to have the 2nd frets of the 1st string and the 3rd string. So that's why there's a little bar mark on your sheet, but it's a half bar. Now the next part might throw you for a loop. It's written as a quintuplet 16th note. I don't really worry about the timing in a tune like this. It's more about getting those 5 notes clean and clear and within the same beat. And the key there, this is a slur where we're going to do hammer to 3rd, pull to 2nd, pull to open. And I actually like to just sort of hammer the 3rd of the next string, even though I'm not going to necessarily pluck it at all. So I do that whole thing with just one pluck on the 1st note. The key here, this is really crucial, is you want to land on the 2nd string in a way where you're not touching the 1st string, because in measure 3, under the B minor 11, we've got that open E string. So if you land on it in a way where you're still touching that string, then that following note is just not going to be clean and clear. So I really had to stop and do this like 100 times. And I practiced that so many times to really try to get that to sound nice and clear. Now after that open note, we go into our B minor shape. And if you want that high E string to continue to ring, you're going to actually not do a bar, but you're just going to fret that with 4 different fingers. So I've got my index finger on the 2nd fret, 3rd finger on the 4th fret of the 4th string, pinky finger on the 4th fret of the 3rd string, and then I've got my middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. That lets me get that open E. And then I lift that all up, holding down still on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. Then we're going to go to the 7th fret of the 3rd string. And you can use your ring finger for that. Now we're on a G chord and we're in measure 5. You'll notice that I wrote that you should put your pinky on the 7th fret of the 1st string to get the melody, and then reach your index finger down to the 5th fret of the big string. So we're going to play that with a couple open strings, 7, 5, open, 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 7. It's kind of like a miniature chord shape. Now in measure 6, we're going to drop down into a bar to get at a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 over G. So I've still got my pinky on the 7th fret of the 1st string. I drop down into a bar, and I've also put my middle finger on to the 6th fret of the 3rd string. And now with my pinky, I'm going to play 7 and slide up to 9. And then I'm going to take my pinky all the way down to 5, pulling off to 3. And now I'm at measure 7 for my F sharp minor 7, and my pinky is going back to 5. Now this chord is a bit tricky. This is an F sharp minor 7 chord, and it looks kind of weird because we're in drop D. So I've got my pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string, and I've got my ring finger on the 4th fret of the big string. And then in the middle there, I've got my index finger pressing down into the 2nd fret as a bar. So you really want to make sure that your thumb is opposite of your index finger, that you're holding the guitar firmly and you're supporting that bar. So it's easy to fluff a note in there. Measure 8, we got a bar on the 2nd fret still going into a B minor. So we're just shifting around a little bit. And then pinky reaches up to 7. And we go 3 to 2. Back to 3. So you'll notice on measure 9, I've got my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret, and there's a good reason for that, because I've got other notes, and if I chose the 1st finger or another finger, maybe I wouldn't be able to reach them. So with my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, I start and then reach my index finger to the 2nd fret. Okay, so now we're in measure 10, and I've got the A7 over C sharp, and I've still got my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the high string. Now I'm reaching my 3rd finger to the 4th fret of the 5th string, and my index is still kind of doing a little bit of a bar here to get the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Then I just kind of let go of that, reach up to 7 with my pinky, 5, 3, and I ended up again with my middle finger on the 3rd fret there. Some open strings, and then fall down into a little half bar. That's actually going to form a D chord. So now I put my middle finger on the 3rd fret just to get your standard D chord. And then measure 12, we've got a G chord. Now because we're in drop D, normally a G would look like that, but because we're in drop D, we've got the 5th fret for the bass. And you can have a nice pause there. There's no need to rush to this next part. But then I'm going to put my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And that's going to let me get into the D over A in the next measure. All the while not lifting up off of the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And now we're in measure 14, we're going to A. This is a standard A major chord that you probably already know. And you're going to lift up a pull off and come back. And now we're going to lift up to almost a D chord. And now we've got a ritardando on measures 15 and 16. So that means we can kind of get dramatic, we can slow stuff down, but it's basically this really cool chord progression that goes like this. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that you can finger that. They're all fine with me. But I like to use my middle finger to do all of the bass notes on the 5th string. And then when I get to this last chord, I still have my middle finger on the 5th string. I found that kept me pretty well aligned. Notice that there is a fermata on the last chord. That not only gives you permission, but actually instructs you to hold this chord for a long time and let everybody's ears have a little bit of rest. At the end of this section, we've got to repeat. So on the first playthrough especially, we're going to go back to the beginning and play the whole thing again before moving on to the next section. Now I'm at measure 17, and you'll notice that once you've got this all together, it's actually the same chord shape moving all around the guitar fretboard. So I've got my 3rd finger on the 8th fret of the big string, and I've got my 2nd finger on the 7th fret of the 2nd string. And then I reach for a just tiny little bar across strings 1, 2, and 3. Like that. So If it weren't for the drop D tuning, this would actually just look like a very common major bar chord, but because we've got the alter tuning, it looks a little weird. So every phrase in this part starts with this chord shape, but that shape does move around the neck. So we're going to play that, and then we're going to go to 12 with our pinky, and then we're going to get to 10 with our pinky. Third finger on the 9th fret of the big string, and then another bar comes back to get 7 and 7, and then I move my third finger to 9 of the 4th string, and then play another 7. And now for measure 19, this is E over G sharp. It's the same chord, just different part of the guitar neck. And I got my pinky on the 10th fret before I transition into the next chord in measure 20. So now we're in measure 20. We're going to pluck those, let those ring a bit, and then we're going to measure 21, same chord shape again. Big jump to the 10th fret of the 1st string with our pinky, and then we're going to come back to the 7th fret of the 1st string. So I've got my pinky on the 7th fret of the 1st string now, barring across the 5th, and third finger on the 7th fret of the 3rd string. Lifting up the pinky to get the 5th fret, which is taken care of by my bar, and then moving the pinky to the 8th fret of the 2nd string before following through with an open string. There's a couple open strings at the beginning of measure 22, and that's going to disguise my transition because I have to jump from here to an open D. So a lot of this stuff is not really coincidental. It's all about making a smooth and beautiful composition sound natural and taking advantage of the things that the guitar is good at. What better way to switch position than a couple open notes? Now we're going to dip back into the minor mode in measure 24. So I've got my pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string and third finger on the 5th fret of the big string. Open 4th string. And really try to, when you get these sad chords, really try to get all the juice out of them because this is where all of the meaning is for this tune. And then we're going to lay our index finger across the 3rd fret of strings 1, 2, and 3 before lifting up that pinky. I mean, this should make you really sad. Before we resolve in measure 25 to the D over F sharp. Notice that I've got a fingering for that too. I've got my index finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and I've got my 3rd finger on the 4th fret. Now, I like to switch my 4th finger to be on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string for those next couple notes in the end of measure 25 so that I can very easily switch into this next chord. If I use my pinky, that's pretty easy. So now I've got my 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the big string and my 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And now we're going to an E minor. So I've got my index finger on the 2nd fret, pinky on the 3rd fret. I'm trying to let those all ring together nice and clearly. Then in measure 28, I've got the A7 sus, nice chord, and then I'm going to make another harmonic on the 12th fret of the 1st string in my own performance. I didn't write that on the tab. Just a little extra touch. Always nice to add your own extra touch when you play a tune. You know, we're not robots. Otherwise, we wouldn't need musicians. We would just have robots playing all the music, and then that wouldn't be any fun, would it? So, you know, take a little bit of liberty with every tune you play. Okay, so at the end of measure 28, we see the instructions, D, C, al coda, which means da capo al coda, which means go to the head and then play until it's time to go to the coda. Now, if you look at measure 29, that is the coda. So that's going to be the spot you're going to be jumping to when it's time. But first, you've got to go back to the beginning and play until you see the words to coda. Once you see the words to coda, you finish that measure, and then you go to measure 29. So basically, you do all of that again, play to measure 27, which we had just finished. Only this time, instead of playing 28, we go straight to 29. And it's customary to skip repeats when you're doing a DCL coda, but it's sort of up to you if you want to do that because you're a solo player. So it's not like you have to coordinate with other musicians. All right, so now we're at the coda and we're ready to go to the end. So we've played this thing a couple times and we're at measure 29. The first 4 notes are the same as what we did before. Kind of this, almost the same A7 sus chord. At the end of measure 29, I have this beautiful transitional chord, which is F sharp over A sharp. So I've got my index finger on the 1st fret of the 5th string, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string, and pinky finger on the 4th fret of the 4th string. Now if you're struggling with that, just drop it, play it, drop it, play it. I call those chord push-ups. I'm not sure if I invented that. I don't think I invented that. But you can think of them as a kind of exercise. Once you do that a few dozen times, it's not going to be too hard for you to get to that chord shape. And then that's going to transition nicely to the B minor. So I've got F sharp over A sharp, and I'm sliding my index and 2nd up, and that's why it's going to resolve so nicely into that B minor chord. So now I'm going to arpeggiate my B minor chord. So now I'm in measure 31, I've got an E7 over G sharp, I've got my pinky on the 7th fret of the high string, and I've got my 2nd finger, my middle finger on the 6th fret of the big string. 3rd finger plays the 7th fret of the 3rd string. Lifting up to the open 1st string, and this is kind of a tough stretch to the 4th fret of the 1st string. And back to the 7th fret. So if you're struggling with that stretch, you could probably kind of change the fingering around, you know, give up some of those notes. It's better to play that passage smoothly with less sustain than to go after some really difficult stretch that you're not going to nail, and then you have, you know, all kinds of badness sounding from your guitar. All right, so to make my way to measure 32, I've got the 4th fret and the 7th fret of the 1st string before I jump up to 14 for this beautiful B minor 7 over A. So I've got A in the bass, 14th fret with my pinky on the melody, like that. And then I'm going to keep my pinky on the melody. I'm going to switch out a couple fingers for the next measure. So now I've got open, 11, 12, nothing on the 2nd string, and then 14th fret of the 1st string still. Now you'll notice that I've got a free finger here on my fretting hand, and I'm just going to reach over to the 12th fret of the 5th string and gently touch it so that I can do a nice natural harmonic. And then I'm still going to use the same finger, and I'm going to kick off 2 more natural harmonics on the 12th frets of strings 6 and 4. And then we're going to go to this F over C. So this is exactly like the D major open chord shape, but it's up here at the 5th fret. And then we're going to go to this G over B in measure 35. And that's really just, if you did a G bar chord, that's what it would look like. And in measure 36, I just do those 3 strings open and then go back to my F over C. This time, instead of going to G over B, I just directly slide that down 2 frets like that. And now we're at the ending, which is really nice. So let's talk about that. We've got D over A, so you should have recognized this chord from earlier on. And then we're going to slide that down a whole step. And this time we're going to include the 3rd string with that chord as well. That's a C over G. And now we've got a B flat major 7 over F. So I've got my 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the big string, index finger on the 1st fret of the 5th string, open 4th, and I've got the 2nd fret here with my middle finger. And you'll see a fermata there as well, so please milk that a little bit. And now we're at measure 39 for the A minor 7 over E. This is a little weird because you've got to skip a string, but you can just kind of arpeggiate it, or you can just do this awkward thing with 4 fingers. And then measure 40, last chord, we're just going to a nice fancy D chord. So I've got my index finger on the 4th fret of the 4th string and pinky finger on the 7th fret. I actually really like to do that with these 2 fingers, which is my middle and pinky, and then I use my index to get another D on top, and then I make that into a little harmonic. Just a sweet way to end a beautiful tune. Okay, so that's it for Lament by Pat Coldrick. Thanks so much to Pat. He's got a lot of beautiful compositions on his website available for purchase. His music is available streaming on Spotify and on YouTube and all kinds of places. Please check him out, support the composer, buy his other transcriptions. His official version has more detail than my version, and it is also in standard music notation. So that's it for Lament lesson. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, please subscribe if you like this lesson. Show me some support because I've got a lot more coming. All right, thanks so much.